They think I'm just Sarah, the photographer, living a simple life in Asheville. I drive a beat-up Jeep, shop at the farmer's market, and my apartment's walls are covered in my own art. That's the story. My sister, Chloe, called me yesterday. Mom said you might skip Christmas this year. Her voice was all practiced concern. Like she was so worried about me. She's always been the fragile one. The truth? I own the apartment building. I could buy and sell their house. I don't. I send them money monthly. I invest and trade daily. My photography licensing deals last year alone brought in over $200,000. My portfolio is worth more than my father's entire career. But to them, I'm just artsy. A hobby, they have no idea, and I like it that way. For now. The seeds of this secrecy were sown long ago. Chloe, always the sensitive one, got all the attention. Childhood birthdays were Chloe's spotlight. School plays, Chloe's triumphs, my achievements, barely a mention. If I did well, it was framed as a threat to Chloe's fragile ego. Why can't you be more like Chloe? I was always too much, too ambitious, too everything. I remember the first time I hit a success. I won a local photography competition. A small victory, but I was ecstatic. I wanted to share it. But when I mentioned it, Mom sighed. Chloe's having a hard time with her college applications, Sarah. Can't you be happy for her? That was the moment, the pivot. My joy didn't matter, only Chloe's. From then on, I learned to filter, to downplay. I sold my first series of landscape prints for $5,000. I buried that news. When I got my first gallery showing, I told them it was a little something I put together. When I made my first $100,000, I just kept sending the usual monthly check, and they continued to dismiss my work. The anonymity became a shield, a way to protect myself from their expectations, their need. I started using different LLCs, different bank accounts. I invested in real estate, purchasing rental properties with no connection to my name. My business started to thrive. My family never knew. It was intoxicating. I built a hidden empire, brick by digital brick. The burden was worth it, until it wasn't. Until yesterday when Chloe called. Christmas. It was the final straw. It's time. I own a diversified investment portfolio managed by a private wealth firm with a current valuation of $3.2 million. My primary income stream, beyond the licensing, comes from a portfolio of commercial real estate holdings, including the apartment building, generating $12,000 in monthly passive income. The gallery where my parents buy art, I quietly funded its initial setup. They've no idea it was me, just a photographer who provided them with their artistic outlet. The catalyst started with that phone call, the veiled request to skip Christmas. It was a carefully crafted plea for my time, a subtle reminder of my obligation. I could feel the resentment simmering. My father calling me, sweetheart, when he wanted something. They see me as a resource, a cash cow. I remember a conversation at Thanksgiving last year. Chloe was complaining about her struggling Etsy shop. My mother, within earshot, mentioned how my photography wasn't a real job. I suppressed a smile, knowing I'd just closed a deal for a national advertising campaign, earning $50,000. The irony was a bitter treat. I decided to make my move. I've been carefully restructuring my financial assets, moving funds to offshore accounts. The next step was to sever the lifeline. I disabled the automatic monthly transfers. I waited. 2 days later, the call. My parents panicked. The heat was out in their house. No money to fix it. My father, his voice wavering, arrived at my apartment. He'd never stepped foot inside before. His usual entitled air was gone, replaced with desperation. Sarah, we need help. This was it. The moment. The door closed behind him. He stood there, shifting his weight, the expensive Italian leather of his shoes scuffed from the cold. The air in my apartment, heated and filled with the scent of brewing coffee, was a stark contrast to the icy chill I knew was gripping their home. He looked around, his eyes taking in the original artwork, the carefully curated furniture, the large, south-facing windows overlooking the city. He knew, of course, about my photography. He'd seen the prints, the ones I'd let him see. But he'd never seen the life behind the prints. Sarah, he began, his voice unusually soft, we were in a bit of a bind. I poured myself a cup of coffee, the motion deliberate. I took a slow sip, savoring the warmth. The silence stretched, thick with unspoken truths. I had an idea of what he was going to say. The furnace, he continued, his gaze dropping to the floor. It's broken. We don't have the money to fix it. His eyes flickered up to mine, searching. He was a man used to control, to having things handled. Now he was vulnerable. I placed my cup on the counter, the clink echoing in the sudden quiet. I walked over to the window, looking out at the snow-covered landscape. The city lights twinkled below, a vibrant contrast to the bleakness that was coming. I turned back to him. The words felt strange on my tongue, a release of the pressure I'd carried for years. "Dad," I said, my voice steady, "I'm not sending any more money." His face crumpled. The man who had always taken, who had always demanded, was finally confronted with the truth. The facade had shattered. The carefully constructed world was about to crumble. His mouth opened, a silent gasp. The color drained from his face, leaving him a pale, mottled mask. He swayed slightly, as if the floor had tilted beneath him. What do you mean?" The question was a whisper, a desperate plea. I met his gaze, no warmth, no apology, just a flat, unwavering stare. "I mean, I'm not your bank anymore." He stumbled back, bumping into a chair. He gripped the edge, his knuckles white. But the money, for the house, the bills," his voice cracked. He was losing it. "You thought I was just a photographer, didn't you?" The words were out before I could stop them, laced with a bitterness that surprised even me. "A hobby, a nice little earner, convenient when you needed something." He stammered, trying to find his footing. "That's not—" "Yes, it is." I gestured around the room. "This apartment, I own it. The gallery where you buy your art, I paid for it. The money you've been getting every month, gone." The words hung in the air, heavy and undeniable. His shoulders slumped. Shame, I realized, was a new emotion for him. He looked around the apartment again, his eyes darting from the expensive artwork to the designer furniture to the state-of-the-art camera equipment in the corner. He finally took a seat as if his legs couldn't hold him. How much?" he mumbled, his voice a low, defeated rumble. "Enough," I said, "to cover your bills and then some." I let that hang there, the knowledge of my hidden empire finally revealed. The immediate aftermath was a blur. The phone calls started within the hour. My mother, hysterical. Chloe, surprisingly, a mixture of anger and confusion. Texts flooded my phone, each one a desperate attempt to manipulate, to guilt-trip, to regain control. "How could you do this to us, Sarah? We're your family. Think of Chloe." I ignored them all. I let the voicemails pile up, the manipulative pleas fading into white noise. I watched the snow fall, a pristine, untouched landscape mirroring the new blankness in my life. The power shift was tangible. The apologies now dripping with opportunism. The sudden acknowledgement of my worth, now that my resources were no longer readily available. They had underestimated me, underestimated my strength. And now, they were paying the price. The bitterness, however, was there, a sour taste in my mouth. The quiet satisfaction was there, too. I found a new apartment, more modest, more me. I poured myself into my work, traveling, shooting, expanding my horizons. I embraced the solitude, the freedom. I was no longer trapped. But the loss was there, too. The loss of what I'd thought was family. Some relationships were irrevocably damaged. Others, surprisingly, evolved. I saw my sister in a new light, a little more respect, a little less entitlement. My parents, well, they were still my parents, but the dynamic was changed. They had to adapt. I'm looking out at the snowy landscape, the city lights twinkling in the distance. I'm no longer seeking validation or belonging. I'm standing tall in my solitude. I've built my own fire. And that warmth is enough. The next few weeks were a study in controlled detachment. The calls, the texts, the frantic emails, I let them all go to voicemail. My phone became a cold, silent sentinel guarding me from their pleas. I knew the house was still cold. I knew the bills were piling up. I knew Chloe was probably beside herself. The calls, when I did finally listen, were a symphony of desperation. My mother, tearful, begging me to reconsider. Chloe, surprisingly, was the angriest. "How could you do this, after all we've done for you?" The audacity of it. The gall, I almost laughed. Then came the offers. My father, suddenly a font of ideas, suggesting we collaborate on a project. Chloe, in a complete role reversal, was now so proud of my success, and would I consider giving her a loan for her failing Etsy shop? The sudden interest in my career, after years of dismissal, was a bitter pill to swallow. I considered sending them a bill for all the years of unpaid emotional labor, but that seemed petty. I found myself strangely invigorated by the chaos I'd unleashed. I started small, making a donation to a local charity, something I'd always wanted to do. I bought a new camera, the one I'd always coveted, without a second thought. I booked a trip to Iceland, a place I'd always dreamt of photographing. I met my father in a restaurant. He was subdued, contrite. He actually apologized. It was the closest he'd ever come to acknowledging any wrongdoing. I listened, my expression carefully neutral. He was different, less arrogant, more human. "We were wrong, Sarah," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "We took you for granted." I nodded, letting the words wash over me. The acknowledgement, even if it was motivated by desperation, was something. Can you help us?" he asked, the question laced with a vulnerability I'd never seen before. I took a deep breath. "I can, but things are different now." I offered a small amount, just enough to keep them afloat, but with conditions. They had to sell the house. They had to downsize. They had to learn to live within their means. They had to, most importantly, acknowledge my worth, not just my wallet. The house sold, the move was a disaster. They were forced to leave behind the furniture and the paintings that I had purchased for them. Chloe's reaction was a mixture of relief, resentment, and a grudging respect. She started calling me, not to demand, but to ask for advice. My mother, surprisingly, was the one who changed the most. She started taking photography classes, showing a genuine interest in my work. She even started referring to me as a successful businesswoman, the phrase dripping with a newfound respect. It wasn't a fairy tale ending. The wounds, the scars of years of disregard, didn't simply disappear. There were still moments of resentment, of bitterness, of lingering pain. But there was also a newfound respect, a fragile understanding. I found myself enjoying my solitude. I embraced the peace and quiet of my apartment, the freedom to be myself, to make my own choices. The city lights twinkled, the snow fell softly. And I realized, with a slow dawning of contentment, that I had finally built my own fire, and the warmth was enough. I was finally free, not just from their expectations, but from the need to seek their approval. The legacy I had built was not one of wealth or power, but one of self-reliance and the quiet, enduring strength of my own spirit. The next few months were a lesson in the art of boundaries. My phone, once a conduit for their demands, became a tool for my own peace. I finally blocked Chloe's number. My parents, after a few half-hearted attempts to guilt me, seemed to accept the new reality. They were, after all, dependent on a small monthly check, and I controlled the spigot. My father's calls dwindled to polite check-ins, requests for photography, advice thinly veiled as attempts at connection. Mom, on the other hand, became a regular caller, her conversations now filled with enthusiastic descriptions of her newfound gardening hobby and unsolicited critiques of my latest exhibition. I learned to navigate their shifting demands with a detached, almost clinical precision. I also experienced a surge of unexpected attention. Old acquaintances resurfaced, suddenly eager to catch up. Distant relatives remembered my birthday. Even a local art gallery, which had previously dismissed my work as too commercial, now wanted to host a solo exhibition. The sudden interest was both flattering and deeply unsettling. It was a stark reminder of how quickly people's perceptions could shift, how fleeting respect could be. I learned to recognize the difference between genuine connection and opportunistic flattery. I learned to say no, without explanation, a power I'd never fully wielded before. My daily life transformed. Mornings were no longer tinged with a low-grade anxiety about their needs. I woke up with a sense of quiet anticipation, a feeling of possibility I hadn't realized I'd been missing. I started taking long walks, exploring the trails near Asheville, the camera always at my side, capturing the light, the landscape, the beauty that had once felt secondary to the demands of my family. I rediscovered my passion for photography, the joy of creating, the thrill of capturing a moment in time. The solitude, initially a source of relief, began to evolve. It wasn't empty, it was filled with the quiet hum of self-reliance. I started to invest in myself, taking courses in digital marketing, exploring new photographic techniques. I opened a small studio in a renovated warehouse space, a haven where I could work, create, and connect with other artists. I found a sense of community, of belonging that I had never experienced with my family. Some days were hard, the silence amplifying the ache of the lost relationship, but the rewards of my newfound freedom were immense. One unexpected consequence was the effect on my relationship with my work. Freed from the pressure to provide, I felt a surge of creativity. I began to take more risks, to explore new styles, to push the boundaries of my art. My work became more personal, more authentic. The gallery owner, initially hesitant, was now singing my praises. My career, once a carefully guarded secret, was blossoming. It was a strange, almost surreal experience to have my success celebrated, not just for financial gain, but for the value of the art itself. The evolution of my relationship with my parents was complex. The resentment lingered, a persistent shadow. The memory of the years of emotional neglect was not so easily erased. But there was also a fragile, tentative understanding. We saw each other. We talked, sometimes about nothing. It was not a relationship built on unconditional love, but a relationship built on a new foundation, mutual respect. It was not what I'd once hoped for, but it was enough. I realized that the illusion of family was a dangerous mirage, and the authenticity of a life lived on my own terms was what sustained me. As the snow began to melt, I looked out at the new season, a symbol of renewal. I was ready. I had faced my demons, built my own fire, and discovered that warmth was all I needed. The next chapter was waiting, filled with possibilities I could not have imagined. The wind whispers through the bare branches, a symphony of solitude. The city lights, blurred by the falling snow, seem distant, unimportant. I stand here, looking out at the quiet beauty of the world, and realize that the cost of my secrecy was a life lived in the shadows, a constant performance for an audience that never truly saw me. The reward, however, is the sun on my face, the air in my lungs, the knowledge that I built this fire, this warmth, on my own terms. The illusion of belonging shattered, revealing a landscape of self-reliance and newfound peace. I'm no longer chasing validation, but embracing the quiet triumph of a life reclaimed. And as the first snowflakes of the season fall, I know the warmth I feel now is enough.